You're listening to Live Free, Think Free on 90.1 KPFT Houston, your home for uncensored news and underground music since 2011.
All right. Welcome to Live Free, Think Free on KPFT Houston 90.1 FM. If you're hearing us there, it's at the 5 o'clock drive time. It's good. I know everybody's happy for the weekend. Lots of things going on. I'm here with Derrick. We're happy to be on Live Free, Think Free. We've been broadcasting this show for how long over here on KPFT?
We've been on KPFT now over 5 years, from the HD2 dial to the FM radio. And even before that, I was doing local news. But yeah, we are on 5 o'clock hour. Today is actually, unfortunately for the moment, our final show at the 5 o'clock Friday time slot. For those who might not know, or those in Houston might not have heard, KPFT, as of Saturday, the 24th, is officially reopening for live broadcasting at a new location off Caroline Street after being closed down for 2.5 years, starting, of course, with COVID and then renovations and just needing a new building. So along with the new building, there's going to be some schedule changes. We won't be on the FM dial for the moment as things get mixed up. We're definitely looking forward to being back as soon as possible, maybe even at our same time slot. That'd be awesome, right? But we are going to be broadcasting on Wednesday evenings on the HD2 dial, which you can find if you have a car equipped for that on the HD2 dial or on the website. All of that info is at kpft.org. You can see the new HD1, aka FM, and HD2 dials and find out the new schedules and for the shows. But yeah, we're excited to talk to you guys today for our, for the moment, final show on FM because we got a lot to cover. And I know you got some events to start with. Micah, should we just jump into it?
Yeah, we do have a lot to cover. And in a little while, I want to make sure we mention, as we always do, where they can plug into everything with us. But let's get into some things that are going on. It turns out there's a punk rock garage sale, and they're telling everybody, if you're a band, if you're an artist, bring your stuff. It's from 6 till 10 p.m. Friday at the Moon Tower. So it's going on now if you're tuned in. Margie Montazeri's return is over at BFE on Friday night, and there's a plant speakeasy by the Houston Plant Market. They're going to be all kinds of conversations about plants and plant exchange and plant sale. This is going on Saturday from noon till 6 at 3118 Harrisburg. So there's dozens of other events to get into, but those caught our attention.
Can I just say something about that plant one, Micah? Because that one sounds pretty cool, actually. I mean, we always try to share some events going on in Houston because we're, from Houston, based in Houston largely. KPFT is based in Houston as well, but we know we have an international audience. But things like this, I do think are worth just looking at for a brief moment more. So it says 50 different vendors to choose from: local candles, soaps, honey, lots more than just plants, and I'm sure all kinds of plants. And for me, this is part of the counter economy. I mean, I would doubt, based on this location and this event, that these people here are paying the local government taxes to set up and have their speakeasy, their discussions, their vendors, and they're going to be drinking beers and talking about all kinds of plants, beginners and rare exotics, etc. I doubt that there's government involvement. It's just free people coming together, exchanging, creating local economy. And I do think in the bigger picture, when people are worried about things like ideas like the Great Reset and central bank digital currencies, that more types of local support like that, even if they seem small, are really important.
Well, real quick, while we're talking about this a little bit further, I'd like to point out this is taking place at Equal Parts Brewing. We've been seeing the breweries pop up as an alternative to like clubs and things like that for event spaces. They are, independent businesses, and whatever their relation may be, obviously they must have one with the local, state, and federal government. These sort of hybrid type events, right? They can piggyback on the security that, these type of establishments bring by having a venue, having a place, but you can be guaranteed that Equal Parts Brewing don't care what those 50 vendors are doing, right? And I think it's very analogous to what we're seeing happening over at the Moon Tower Inn. I'm sure, when you go to the Moon Tower and buy your food, you're paying sales tax, etc. But I guarantee you, when you go to Punk Rock garage sale that's being hosted there, whereby they're actually opening it up to the community, you're getting, as you're speaking, an underground, an open, a free market, whatever you want to call it, an unobstructed exchange by people. So yeah, it's really interesting to see, and maybe I'd like it to see more businesses, be open to these sort of things, because no matter where you sit on it, it's obviously bringing people through your establishment, and it's making your establishment something that's engaged in the community. So if you're an independent business, I think this is a great way, and reach out to a local station, KPFT, and get them to talk about it.
Absolutely. All right. Well, let's go ahead and continue. You are listening to Live Free, Think Free here on 90.1 KPFT Houston and the Conscious Resistance. And as Micah said, we've been broadcasting here on KPFT for 5 years, but also in general for over a decade now at this point. And if you want to stay in touch with our show, especially if you've maybe caught us on KPFT, for those who aren't watching us online, but maybe just listen to us through KPFT, until we're back on the FM, you can always find our upcoming shows and rebroadcasts and clips and archives at thehoustonfreethinkers.com, thehoustonfreethinkers.com. That's the best place to go support us, to share our videos and our archives. And of course, you can look up Live Free, Think Free radio on Spotify and everywhere else you'll find us. So yeah, one of the things that we have appreciated with our time with KPFT is that, and this has been interesting, is that while we often discuss over the last couple of years, but I think even before most people were paying attention, censorship on the internet and from what's now known as shadow banning, using algorithms to limit people's reach, or based on hashtags or certain specific, maybe even just titles or just specific accounts. These things that we all know about now, and then including this whole fact-checking ecosystem that now exists. So we've been covering this for years, and while many people, including us, have been censored or moderated or banned or had videos deleted on various social media platforms, on KPFT, besides those 7 words we can't say, we're pretty open to share what we like and our views, even when they're not maybe a part of the majority. Well, the next couple of stories I have here relate to this topic of social media, and specifically censorship of social media by the Biden administration, and not just the Biden administration kind of on their own, but direct collusion with various social media companies. And so there's a couple of them here. All these, of course, will be linked at thehoustonfreethinkers.com after the show broadcast. I'm not going to read these 3 articles, but I do want to just make a couple notes, Micah, and then get your thoughts. I know we've been following these already, but this is starting with the beginning of September, so September 1st up to just the last couple of days, just to kind of show people what's been happening just in the last 3 weeks. Over 50 Biden administration employees, 12 U.S. agencies involved in social media censorship push. And this is according to documents which have been released. And they show senior officials in the U.S. government, including White House lawyer Dana Ramus, Deputy Assistant to the President Rob Flaherty, and one-time White House senior COVID-19 advisor Andy Slavitt, have been in touch with one or more major social media companies to try to get the companies to tighten rules on allegedly false and misleading information on COVID-19, and to take action against users who violate the rules. In July 2021, for instance, after Biden said that Facebook was, quote, killing people by not combating misinformation, an executive at Meta, formerly Facebook, reached out directly to Surgeon General Vivek Murthy, a Biden appointee, to say that the government and Meta teams met after the remarks to, quote, better understand the scope of what the White House expects from us on misinformation going forward. The same executive letter wrote to Murthy saying, I wanted to make sure you saw the steps we took just this past week to adjust policies on what we are removing with respect to misinformation, as well as steps taken to further address the disinfo dozen, including removing pages linked to the group. And the disinfo dozen, of course, includes people that I've worked with, and people who are, I know, fans of this show, including Sayer G, Dr. Mercola, I think Del Bigtree's in there, a host of other people who this disinformation doesn't label. And so these documents are coming out of ongoing lawsuits. There's actually 2 or 3, maybe more, dozen, probably up to a dozen lawsuits going on right now related to this. I know one of them involves Louisiana and one involves Texas. This other one, reported September 7th, judge orders Fauci and White House press secretary to hand over records related to online censorship pressure. And this is related to the lawsuit taking place in U.S. District Court for the Western District of Louisiana, which issued this ruling saying that Dr. Anthony Fauci and White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre need to respond to document requests by the New Civil Liberties Alliance and in conjunction with the Missouri and Louisiana Attorney Generals on behalf of plaintiffs in the state of Missouri versus Joseph R. Biden. Judge Terry A. Doty made the order and basically is saying that they need to release this documentation saying that they don't have a right to just deny it. The judge's ruling says, quote, or is ruling on whether the White House defendants, White House press secretary, and Dr. Anthony Fauci should be compelled to respond to the plaintiffs' interrogatories and document requests, and whether Fauci, in his capacity as head of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease, the NIH, should be required to provide additional responses to plaintiffs' document requests. And the judge ruled in favor of the plaintiffs and said the defendants have no legal right to refuse to comply with the order. Quote, in accordance with the previous expedited discovery order, plaintiffs served interrogatories and document requests upon White House press secretary and Dr. Anthony Fauci. The government defendants have refused to provide any interrogatory responses or responsive documents, maintaining that these would be internal communications that would implicate serious separation of powers concerns. The plaintiffs are required to exhaust other avenues for the discovery first, and that it would be unduly burdensome and disproportional. Okay, so just a lot of legal speak to get her to the point of saying that they don't have the right to deny the public access to these documents. And yeah, so this organization, the National New Civil Liberties Alliance, is representing several plaintiffs who are suing big tech platforms and the White House. And yeah, so the judge ruled in this ruling about 2 weeks ago, saying that Dr. Fauci's communications would be relevant to the allegations in reference to alleged suppression of speech relating to the lab leak theory of COVID-19 and the alleged suppression of speech about the efficiency, I think they mean efficacy, of masks in COVID-19 lockdowns. And the judge said the secretary's communications as press secretary could be relevant to all of the plaintiff's examples. Government defendants are making a blanket assertion of all communications to social media platforms by Fauci and the press secretary based upon executive privilege. He goes on basically saying they don't have the right to do that. So yeah, that's another one. So it seems that in the coming weeks, months, however long this takes, Fauci's personal communications with certain social media companies and the press secretary will be released. And then the third one, and I'm done here for this little part, this one's just a week ago, court rules against social media companies and free speech censorship fight. And this one's really interesting, Micah. I wonder what you think about this. It says, we reject the idea that corporations have a freewheeling First Amendment right to censor what people say. And this is going to go to the Supreme Court for sure, but it says a federal appeals court in New Orleans has ruled in favor of a Texas law that seeks to rein in the power of social media companies like Facebook and Twitter to censor free speech. The decision made by the Fifth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals in New Orleans, handed down on September 16th, upholds the constitutionality of a Texas law signed by Greg Abbott last year and delivers a victory to Republicans in their fight against big tech censorship of conservative viewpoints. Today, we reject the idea that corporations have the free-willing First Amendment right to censor what people say, wrote U.S. Circuit Court Judge Andrew Oldham. So it's related to this law known as House Bill 20, which was passed last year. And so NetChoice and the Computer and Communications Industry Association, they sued, saying that private companies like Facebook and Twitter have a First Amendment right to moderate their content that's posted on their platforms and to decide on what forms of speech to allow or ban. And they wrote in a press release when they sued, the act tramples the First Amendment by allowing the government to force private businesses to host speech they don't want to. The groups also argued that the Texas law does not only prevent censorship, but allows Texas to, quote, police and control speech online, overriding the First Amendment rights of online businesses. A lower court sided with the lawsuit and decided to block the law. Then this ruling overturned that decision. And the judge continued in this new ruling, the platforms argue that buried somewhere in the person's enumerated right to free speech lies a corporation's unenumerated right to muzzle speech. He said the implications of the big tech platforms' arguments are staggering, as they would allow entities like social media companies, banks, and mobile phone companies to cancel the accounts of people who express views or spend money in support of political parties or views such corporations oppose. The judge also said that the protections sought by the platforms in challenging the Texas law would allow them to win a dominant market position by attracting users with misleading claims of being champions of free speech, but later cracking down on expression. And the Texas Attorney General, Ken Paxton, called this decision, quote, a massive victory for the Constitution and free speech in a federal court. Big tech cannot censor the political voices of any Texans. So yeah, that's a couple of stories there. I know there's a lot of info, Michael, but what do you think about this one first, just in general, this issue here in Texas relating to can they, stop social media companies from censoring people? Yeah, go ahead.
I think it's, it's just opinion here, right? Of course. But one thing I'd say in analysis of this is think of the different situations. Now, we're already talking about government stepping in and doing something either way you cut it. Okay. So that's already presupposed in the solution. Okay. With that being the case, look at the other things that government has come in and said the argument that the people have basically had that, look, yeah, you have a private business, but you don't, if you have a private business that's open to the public, you don't have the right to exclude people you don't like. Meaning you got to let them in no matter what their religious or sexual or race is, right? Like if you own a bar, if you own a restaurant, right? Why? Because they believe that America is supposed to be this free exchange, this free place for people to go, right? To be able to move about in the public sphere and not have the public sphere sectioned off by people's individual opinion. I see this as very analogous to this, right? Because when you sign up for Facebook or Twitter, they don't say, hey, whatever opinions you express, and these can change, right? Like next month, it's going to be a whole nother set of problems and opinions they don't like. I asked Fauci called them divisive opinions other than his, but that's the situation. And it's just like the restaurant or the diner that would only serve whites or something, right? I mean, think about it. If the idea of America is supposed to be, this open place where free people are free and able to go, through different public places. I mean, that's what we're aiming for. And if the idea of America is you're supposed to have freedom of speech, other than, certain small restraints like not firing a theater or whatever, and you go and you sign up for these platforms and nowhere do they say right away, if we just don't like your opinion, we're going to ban you and ruin all your content. They invite you to come create content. They say, come on in, all your friends are here. And like that other one where they prop themselves up as a bastion of free speech and then just clamp down on it. Well, how do I put it? I kind of see it as a good thing because, it's going to constantly change. It's going to constantly change. Whatever opinions they don't like today, they'll be banning and blocking. And if they're legitimate, they'll become breaking news in 3 months or 6 months. And then it'll look back. I mean, think if they could have done this back during the 9/11 times, if they could have done this just to the ideas being traded in conversations out there where people knew the problems with weapons of mass destruction. What if they could have just shut down the idea that to even contest that there are weapons of mass destruction? What if they could just, shut down ideas at any time? And that's kind of what we're getting at.
I think so. And well, let me throw in a couple ideas here, Micah, to what you said. Because first off, so I don't really know. This one I think is just difficult for me because generally speaking, I'm with you on, and I think that this has just been the position of the show of like, don't really favor government intervening with businesses, especially, private business with people, right? And that's a slippery slope, right? Getting them involved in this case. And in this case, it's like arguing for quote unquote our side of like, I've been directly censored by YouTube and Facebook, had channels deleted with 5 million plus views, had anti-media and Ben Swan and people I've worked with having millions of followers that helped fund a website and team of writers through social media deleted overnight. And nobody promised us that, but it was gone because Facebook didn't like the things we were saying, right? So it's something I have personal experience with. But a couple of things come to mind. Like first off, like it's really difficult to, based on those other stories that we were just showing, like for example, that we now have documented evidence of this direct, close relationship between the government, or at least let's say the Biden administration, that we know for sure, and Facebook and Twitter and Google, literally directly. We talked about this over the last few months, like them directly talking during COVID times, telling them people to target, to go after topics and stuff. And I just think that for me at some point, and then also the connections between like Facebook and Facebook specifically, but Google as well, between the CIA and the Department of Defense, there's this like growing social media, military industrial complex relationship where now there's like a revolving door between those industries where people are going from that military to join Facebook or the intelligence community to join Facebook. There's some really good articles on Mint Press News outlining all the different staff on Facebook now that have come from that industry. So at some point it feels like, how can we still call them private companies, right? Like at least in this case of, we're not talking small businesses, right? We're talking about Facebook, Twitter, Google, these kind of big ones that do have these really, really close relationships that strain the idea, at least in my mind, that they're private. So I don't know if, I never want to use the government as a sort of as a tool to defend myself, unless absolutely necessary. And maybe the worst case scenario, the best thing that could happen is the government does something quote unquote good and stops these companies from being able to silence people's speech. But at the same time, my other thought is that there's already better platforms that exist that are censorship free, that like we're broadcasting on Odyssey and Rockfin right now. Nobody's going to censor us for the things we say, no matter how crazy you think your opinions may be, right? There's platforms for that. But the masses don't know about that because Google, Facebook, et cetera, have monopolized so much of the world. And all the cell phones come with, sorry to go on this rant, cell phones in like Mexico and elsewhere come equipped with basically Facebook and WhatsApp. That's how everybody communicates, any business, anything like that. It's like, you got to use those tools. That's how it is in India and a lot of other places. So they just have this monopoly on it. And yeah, so I don't know. I mean, I think the Texas thing, it's the Texas government trying to do something good, saying, hey, social media companies can't censor people's free speech. But yeah, where does it go? Maybe there is an argument like the corporations were trying to argue, saying, hey, this gives them the ability to go beyond just protecting speech, but then controlling speech, right? Like it could be bad.
That's the point, right? Because once they're allowed to censor things, then those tools can be used to control speech, basically. And that's the thing about having to keep it open. I think there's a certain point, if you're marketing yourself as a social media platform and you don't have in your terms of services things like, okay, we're not going to talk about just disgusting topics, and I'm sure you could just come up with your own individual ideas, and there's obviously some that more people would agree on: violence and murder, planning a murder, for example. We don't allow people to plan a murder on our site. That sort of stuff, if it's in the terms of service, we can understand that and sign up and agree. But when it's just constantly revised for each new situation, then we're in a whole different world. And I don't tend to favor government solutions, but at the same time, if these entities, Facebook, et cetera, are given a permission to exist, not to mention funding, as you pointed out, you're concerned about the line, whether they're private or public, at the same time, and not meaning public, meaning governmental, that's corporatism, right? So at the same time, if they are, I don't really have a problem with the government forcing them to abide by the fundamental law of this country that at least most people would agree on, that we have the ability to express ourselves as long as it's not endangering others.
Yeah, that's not a bad point. We got this comment from Five of a Kind Media. When government works with social media companies behind closed doors, it's no longer social media, it's state-run media. I like that. You're listening to Live Free, Think Free on 90.1 KPFT Houston and the Conscious Resistance Network. We are live for the moment, final broadcast on Friday afternoons, but we will be back soon on KPFT before you know it. In the meantime, you can find us on Wednesday evenings on the HD2 dial. Check out the schedule at kpft.org. All right, we got a couple other stories to get into. Micah, I know this is just a brief one, but it's worth mentioning. You found something interesting Fauci said that maybe we should pay attention to. You're muted. There you go.
Yeah, no doubt. Sorry. Yeah, it's an interesting story, and the actual original article comes out of the Atlantic, and it has much more detail. And there's some important parts from the Atlantic story. But let's just get into the main part here. Fauci says that, sometimes when you have to take draconian measures, like that's no problem, as long as you're saying you're crouching around something good, more or less. It's okay, Dan, right? It's okay to, endanger children and do these things. It turns out that before making his central point about when you have to make the tough decisions, and lock people down and create these problems, or anything in a draconian sense, Fauci first blamed, and this is what I thought was most interesting in the Atlantic article, is that he first blamed divisiveness of social media. Basically, people having an opinion for turning every piece of his guidance during the pandemic into a confusing and controversial statement. Quote, when you have a divisiveness in society where every time you say something, he really means I, or, the authority, and this could be whether the authority's right or wrong, right? In this case, I'm sure a lot of listeners are out there thinking, he's a medical doctor. We need to listen to him, right? What's your opinion? Do you know anything about it? How dare you have an opinion, right? But let's keep moving forward. So every time I say something, or I have X number of people with social media looking to attack it, that adds to the understandable confusion when you're dealing with an evolving outbreak, Fauci stated. And I want to give some sympathy to that. Of course, if you know something and you're trying to tell a crowd, I think anybody's been in this ever since you've been at the playground. When you know something and you're trying to tell the crowd and some people don't want to listen to you, that makes it hard. Okay, right or wrong. But yeah, it turns out that Fauci's comments followed this bombshell education report that came out earlier this month, revealing that the lockdowns, which led to school closures and virtual learning policies, resulted in what the Department of Education has said was the largest average score decline in reading since 1990s. Well, maybe we don't have to read anymore. We just scroll. I'm sure, the tech giants love that. And first
Now
ever
you just get jacked into the metaverse and download it to your brain.
Yeah, and the first ever score decline in mathematics among the nation's school children. But the main takeaway, rather than just that he thinks draconian policies are okay when the authoritarians think they're good. Okay, there's that, and then there's also the more kind of frustrating to me point of view, is divisiveness of social media. It's divisiveness of people being able to express their opinion. Part of me just is like understands when there's an expert saying something. It's frustrating when people who don't know about it voice an opinion that's just contrary to what you know to be the case. But when that is the case, the task is to explain it, or let those people move about in their ignorance. And you could say, oh, in this one they could jeopardize everybody. Well, you see what's happening here. They've got people so alarmed over this COVID thing that they're willing to basically no longer believe in, freedom of information and exchange of information, no longer believe in a liberal society that can learn and figure out things on their own when informed. These people, whether it's Fauci or the next thing, or like as we keep bringing up the 9/11, or a military general telling you this is anthrax, this is what's happening. And people are stuck here having to make decisions on their own because there is a lot of misinformation out of the box. Anything else would be stupid to pretend. Never mind Operation Mockingbird, that whole purpose was that. This is what they get. Either you believe in people being able to make decisions or you believe in controlling them. And I think that Dr. Fauci has basically said which side of the coin he's on.
Absolutely. Well, let's continue. We got one more set of stories here before we go to our first music break. Guys, I'm not a doctor. We're not doctors here, but I just want to share this because it's news items that you're going to be hearing about it on other news platforms that you probably tune into this week if you listen to anything like mainstream media. This is coming from ABC News, definitely a mainstream news outlet, saying updated boosters for elementary school age children weeks from authorization, according to the FDA vaccine chief. Primary vaccines are already authorized for children 6 months and older. Primary, so the first one they want the kids to be getting, which, as we've pointed out on the show for the last couple of years, children are extremely low risk. That's not myself. That's the stats. That's the facts from any doctor. I went in Houston and we filmed and documented whenever they started giving out shots to kids there. I asked parents about the low risk. I asked Dr. David Pearce, the Houston health director, about, the low risk to kids. And, we've gone down this road, but regardless, they continue. And now these new boosters are just weeks away. So now this is interesting though. This is why I'm bringing this up. So it says, while primary vaccines are already authorized for children 6 months and older, the FDA has yet to authorize the newly updated booster. Now, you guys may have been hearing about this so-called newly updated booster that's been going out there. There's some facts that we need to know about this real quick. So I'm going to pull up a post here from the World Council for Health. These updated shots, mRNA injections, are also known as bivalent bivalent vaccines. So it says here, updated COVID-19 mRNA injections approved after testing on 8 mice and 0 humans. This was published earlier this month, September 6th. On August 31st, the US FDA amended the emergency use authorizations of both the Moderna COVID-19 injection and Pfizer BioNTech COVID-19 injection. These EUAs now include the use of a new bivalent vaccines, also known as updated boosters, like we were just talking about. Updated boosters going to be ready for kids in weeks, that contain mRNA from the original strain of SARS-CoV-2, as well as shared components of the BA4, BA5 lineages of the Omicron variant. Look, I want to say this just as a kind of side note. I'm not even confident I believe in these people's claims about the variants and this and that. So I know there's going to be people who say something about that. But set that aside for a moment and just listen to what they're saying. These updated boosters, bivalent vaccines, contain components of the 2 variants of the Omicron variant, BA4, BA5. And this is what they're calling the updated booster. These updated boosters are available for use just 2 months after an initial or booster injection. While Moderna's booster is approved for those 18 and older, Pfizer's has been approved for anyone 12 and older. As we just read a moment ago, they're preparing to release this approval for children, and the weeks away, apparently. So they're saying that the bivalent vaccines were approved, according to the FDA, based on the totality of available evidence, including extensive safety and effectiveness data for each of the monovalent mRNA COVID vaccines, safety and immunogenicity data obtained from the clinical study. So they said there's a clinical study, right? Now, these 3 regulatory agencies have neglected to inform the public that no human studies were done before the approval of these new updated boosters, and that the clinical study referenced included only 8 mice. According to the World Council for Health, this is both unprecedented and reckless. They say, quote, these agencies have also failed to adequately take into account the extensive safety data available worldwide that has consistently demonstrated concerning safety signals, including data publicly available via the VAERS Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, the national early warning system that the FDA co-manages with the CDC. So they start talking about, they found adverse drug reactions from the COVID injections already, which they say are sufficient to have got it recalled. Now, just to back this up for those who might not believe what I just said, which is that these updated boosters that we just hear from ABC News reported in the last 2 days are weeks away from being approved for elementary school kids. The World Council for Health says that there's been no studies other than on 8 mice, no kids or no humans. And then here it is being reported August 30th by the NBC News. So again, mainstream news. FDA expected to authorize new COVID boosters without data from tests in people. The lack of human data means officials likely won't know how much better the new shots are, if at all, until the fall booster campaign is well underway. And then you can search and find videos of the head of the CDC and other, I think Fauci himself acknowledging recently, Micah, saying like, yeah, there's no time for testing, because if we do human testing, then by the time we're done, they're going to be outdated and we're going to have spent the money on the shots for nothing, right? But I just want to make that clear as we get ready for a music break. And as people out there, I know we're going into the fall in the US and around part of the world, up in the Northern Hemisphere, and cold season, flu season, whatever you want to believe about that. People are going to be pushing for more of these shots, but just want to make that clear. The updated booster bivalent vaccines that they're talking about have been tested not on humans at all, only on mice trials. I don't know if I would do that personally. But yeah, what do you think, Micah? Should we go to a song?
What do you? After I ask a question, what do you say in general and quickly that try to conflate the questions about these untested vaccines with the idea that you're against all vaccines and people like you, we'd still have polio? What do you say? Because they respond people who aren't versed in research themselves, or doubting or questioning what's coming through. These are people that would probably back in the day say, oh look, the earth is the center of the universe, believe the science. So what do you say to them that think that you're a person that if we listened to you, we'd still have something like polio?
Yeah, I think that's an extreme argument to make. I also think that label anti-vaxxer serves that purpose that you're talking about there, right? For people to be like, oh no, they're the anti-vaxxer, they're the crazy one, etc. And I've heard that and I've seen that. But what I'll say to that is that the so-called anti-vax crowd that I've met, both as a journalist and as somebody with questions, is a group of very eclectic group of people. Moms, soccer moms from the suburbs. You got husbands who, have kids that they believe have been injured by shots. You've got health freedom advocates. You got people who've received shots and say, hey, I just believe in, individual choice and bodily autonomy. All those types of people would be labeled anti-vax for asking questions. Or like you said, people might make the assumption if you're asking questions about one, that you're against everything. Personally, within that movement, there definitely is people who think that all the shots are bad, and those people exist. And then there's people who are like, no, I don't really have that position. Like I said, people who might get shots themselves, but they believe people should have a right to decide for themselves, right? So that movement or that label, that idea, like it shouldn't be accepted or shouldn't be a conversation we're able to have, I think is really dangerous. And that's why I wanted to mention that story, because I think that is important that people have that. I'm not here to tell anybody what to do with that information, but hopefully they know that information if they didn't know it before. Now they know. But all right, guys, you're listening to Live Free, Think Free. We're going to be back. We got some more to cover.
So they're putting their hands into basically they're putting something in their body that's only been tested on 8 mice when they do that, or worse yet, they're putting it in their children's body and it's been tested on 8 mice. And what were the results? I mean, I don't know the results. Maybe 2 of the 8 mice had a real problem with it. I don't know. Anyway,
we don't know. All right, guys. Yeah, something to think about. You're listening to Live Free, Think Free on 90.1 KPFT Houston. If you enjoy our show, find us at thehoustonfreethinkers.com to make sure you don't miss anything. We're going to go to our friends Heavy Thoughts, newer local band featuring one of our longtime friends and supporters. So check this out. We'll be right back.
Sinking, climbing, some things aren't for everyone. I've seen some things that could take a father from his son. We should. Some people are better off alone. Are we really all alone? I've gone too hard, been drinking every night alone. Cigarettes and broken homes. Fight for rights that make you stand to your feet. We are living in an age of killer streets. Fighting for a safer place we all can call a home. Every one of us should have known. I've been drinking every night alone. Cigarettes and broken homes. Are some things I shouldn't that I know. But you've been places I would never go. When somebody freaks out and nothing becomes clear, you wanna just peel out and get away from here. But I've been afraid of losing a friend and changing my life all over again. I've flown too close to hope. I've flown too close to hope. Well, I've been drinking every night alone. Cigarettes and broken homes. Are some things I shouldn't that I know. But you've been places I would never go. I've been drinking every night alone. Cigarettes and broken homes. Are some things I shouldn't that I know. But you've been places I would never go. Places I would never go.
All right. Welcome back to Live Free, Think Free on 90.1 KPFT Houston and the Conscious Resistance Network. That was Heavy Thoughts, featuring, like I said, one of our long-term friends and listeners. What'd you think, Micah?
It definitely sounded good. I'll probably be listening to it again. I'm glad to see some of these people are still creating and doing things, and I'm thankful. That's an aspect of KPFT that's very important to both, I'm sure, yours and my hearts, and we're thankful to be able to share it. The video is good. I liked that. It's good to see Houston just continuing to create. So yeah,
Absolutely. Cool.
that's great, and we hope more people will send us music they know about, or if they're musicians or creators in any regard. Send us a message any way you can, and if we can get into it, we will.
Absolutely. Well, let's go ahead and continue. We've got about 15, 20 minutes or less here with you on 90.1 KPFT Houston. As we mentioned earlier in the show, this Friday, this is our last show for a little while here on the FM on Friday afternoons, but we will be back soon. If you want to keep up with us, regardless of whether on KPFT or elsewhere, you're going to want to follow us at thehoustonfreethinkers.com. We also have a Facebook page. We're on Spotify. If you look up Live Free, Think Free, and make sure it's Micah and Derrick, underground news, uncensored news, underground music since 2011. So yeah, find us all over the place. That's
Thank
us.
you for everyone who does follow us there and elsewhere. Y'all mean the world to us. Y'all join in the conversation. Being able to quote your concerns, it means a lot. It shows to the other people listening that they're not alone. Their ideas, mean something. If you're willing to express yours, they become more willing to express theirs. So thank you, everybody who contributes in any way to this show like that.
Absolutely. Well, let's go on to our next story. We got a few more to cover today. We're going to get into some news on the Federal Reserve, which I think I know you got a lot to say on that, Mike, and it's become really timely with some of the things we were just talking about last week with the moves from the Fed, inflation, Houston. But before we get to that, I want to talk about this topic that I wrote an article on. I noticed that there's been some chatter on Twitter and elsewhere, right? Some of the alternative research community, about this Biden administration executive order that they issued earlier in September. They actually had a whole week where they did all kinds of actions towards the bioeconomy, you could say, which, that's a new term for many people trying to understand, what does that mean? What is biomanufacturing is another term that they talk about. So I decided to do an article about this, and really, Michael, what I found, I'm not going to spend the whole time on this article. This is 2,000 word article. So take some time, go through it. A lot of links in here, a lot of references. But what I do want to say, and this is at thelastamericanvagabond.com, you can find this. It's called "The Biden Administration Embraces Technocracy with the Promise of $2 billion and Funding for the Bioeconomy." And again, this executive orders on September 12th called "Advancing Biotechnology and Biomanufacturing and Innovation for a Sustainable, Safe, and Secure American Bioeconomy." And there's been a lot of people critical of what it appears to be doing. And so this article, I just wanted to look at it. What does this even mean? What are they actually saying? Because these are some pretty new terms. And then in the bigger picture, I started to see that, wow, this wasn't just one executive order from the Biden administration. They actually had a whole week dedicated to bioeconomy, biomanufacturing. They held a summit on advancing bioeconomy and had these different industry people working on what's called synthetic biology now, bioworks companies, things like that. And then they also appointed a director to ARPA, which is ARPA-H, which it was announced, just earlier this year and officially came into being in March of this year, and has been described as being modeled after sort of a sister agency to DARPA, the infamous military agency working on exoskeletons and robot dogs and all kinds of crazy stuff, robot soldiers and things like that. So ARPA-H now has been appointed their first director, this woman who was the VP of an organization, a company called Ginkgo Bioworks that is in this bioeconomy industry. So this article that I did is kind of like trying to untangle that whole web and explain, what does that even mean, bioeconomy? The White House, just as a definition, since we're mentioning it briefly here, the White House describes the bioeconomy as economic activity derived from life sciences, particularly in the areas of biotechnology. Biotechnology, of course, includes things like genetic engineering, gene science, biomanufacturing, and includes industries, products, services, and the workforce. The United Nations called the bioeconomy, quote, "the production and use and conservation of biological resources, including related knowledge, science, technology, and innovation, to provide information, products, and services to all economic sectors with the aim of moving towards a sustainable economy. So you start to see a lot of it is very similar United Nations Agenda 2030 language about promoting sustainable development goals, et cetera, the bioeconomy. They also call this the circular bioeconomy, which at its, I think, most basic approaches, reuse, repair, recycle, et cetera, like that. And then kind of in a bigger case, gets into the idea of using synthetic technology to create new foods for humans, to recycle waste, and to use biomanufacturing to repackage it as food or, other types of items like that. And yeah, and so this Ginkgo Bioworks is a company I think people need to keep their eyes on. That's really all I have time to say about that for the moment. But I think that anybody who's heard about this executive order, wants to learn more about that, they should go check out the article again at The Last American Vagabond.
I think that economy it's pretty broad if you think about it. I mean, think of all your food is biologically based. Just so many things. Your family, your own.
They say it includes the whole like food systems, like you said, everything related to that. And then like there's probably a bunch of very mundane uses for this type of technology. And again, it's all depends on if people think like we should, they have ethical arguments about we shouldn't be playing with genes, which I'm kind of like, I don't know if we should be doing this, but it's happening. Companies are literally and what the executive order says, Micah, specifically, is that we should work to write cells like circuitry. Like be able to write cells, and I think that's where people start getting real nervous about like, what is this exactly talking about? But they promote it as we're going to cure cancer, we're going to cure Alzheimer's, we're going to cure diseases now because we're going to start playing God with genes. And literally, like Ginkgo Bioworks describes themselves as a bioworks company that they synthesize biology, they create life, and they manipulate it and things like that. So it does get into some ethical areas, I think. So I got one more before we jump into the economy. I know you got a couple.
One last thing on there real quick. I think you're right about the ethical areas, and I don't think the ethical areas are so much some people will not agree with this statement, obviously, but I don't think the ethical areas are so much our capacity to, start a fire as much as what we use the fire for. That's really what I'm starting to think, and yeah, we're always going to talk about how we're going to use it to cook food and keep us warm and all that stuff. But, we're also going to set arrows on fire and send them into the villages of our enemies. And, that's sort of the thing, is how is it going to be used? And obviously the government wants to get out there and get a hold of it quickly because things are going on, so that's where my concern about the ethics of it, because, they're going to spend money on certain projects and other projects will be neglected. They're going to contain information. They're going to storehouse information. They're going to work towards goals that only the people that are pushing the money out are aware of. The individual researchers may just be trying to figure out how to light an arrow on fire. I know the analogy is a little stretched, but I think that's the important part here. Not whether mankind can manipulate a gene or not, but how will that knowledge be used and by who and for what purposes?
I agree, Micah. I agree. So, well, look, I wanted to share one more comment. We'll move forward because we're getting down to the last few minutes here on the show. We appreciate everybody with us. Just to kind of clarify for those in this executive order, as one of our commenters here said, in Section 3 of the executive order, it talks about harnessing biotech and biomanufacturing to achieve societal goals. What are the societal goals, or who decides them, is what the comment says. And the societal goals are what I was just pointing to a moment ago. The societal goals in terms of the U.S. and what they're talking about are the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. This is like what they believe, like the society that we're headed to, the Great Reset, this sort of type of thing. They, promoted in this good for everybody, sustainability, et cetera. So this next story I got is just super brief. I'm trying to see if I can pull this up real quick. Maybe I'll just share it if it's not going to pull up. But basically, in case you needed a reminder, Micah, the bankers, they think that we're all just silly and funny people and that they want to laugh at us. And they literally this week at the House Financial Oversight Committee, the bankers and some of the current committee members laughed about the revolving door from Congress to banks. This is being reported on G3 News on Telegram with a video clip that I'm going to show here in just a second. But I want to preface it. It says a truly wild moment yesterday from the House Financial Services Committee, where they laugh about the revolving door from Congress to banks. Representative Hollingworth said, quote, "She has been a team member for a couple of years now, but on Monday she becomes a Bank of America team member. I hope you'll take care of her." And the Bank of American CEO says, "We'll do that. Her father already works for us." And they all laugh. And just like, it's a silly little moment. Like I said, it's not even really worth showing, but it's just to show you the kind of, I guess, sort of thinking and how blatant these sorts of control have become, and this sort of like corruption, I guess you could say.
Yeah. Even if it's not corrupt, it is at least corporatism, right? I mean, these revolving doors, and like you're pointed out here in the banks, but we've seen it in, the FDA. We've seen it in the communications. And look at this one. Speaking of communications, I think this is kind of interesting. We were talking about aspects of this earlier in the show. I would not, and the only reason I brought this up is because who would expect this? But $500 million is going to be spent by the USDA. Nobody's shocked by that, right? But they're going to be spending, the USDA is going to be spending $500 million extending high-speed internet to rural America. That's right. Yeah, it turns out that a lot of it's coming from loans and grants, and it was part of a program that had come out earlier this year that you may or may not have heard about. But I guess it was just that, this is how these things happen. You hear about it and then you kind of forget about it. And then as you get into life a little bit farther, you hear, oh, guess what? It's the USDA who's going to be connecting things. Oh, I thought it was going to be the FCC, or it's going to be this, or it was going to be these telecommunications companies that are going to reap all the profits from it that would be doing it. But no, this is, where you have basically socialized costs and privatized profits, because you don't think they're going to make money off of these people all being on high-speed internet now. Like, there's millions of people living in rural America. So nonetheless, this is what's going on, and you can't be an individual and get one of these grants. You can't be like a individual, a Tesla or a Marconi and go and get one of these. You either have to be some kind of collective. You either got to be a corporation, an Indian tribe. You see what I'm saying? You've got to be a group. But yeah, that's what's going on.
That's a really interesting one to me, Micah, because I've followed the 5G rollout for years now, and one of the reasons they promote 5G, the 5G network, which involves towers every 200 to 500 feet, but we're told when it's all done, it'll be internet everywhere and it'll be amazing, is because of this digital divide that this article I think is hinting at. They say that, well, in the rural areas and poor communities, which I think there is some truth to it, people tend to get technologies last, and so we need to fight that by making sure that they get 5G first, and money and things like that. But it is really crazy to see that it's the USDA, again, that's the Department of Agriculture, not the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, that typically would deal with those things, as you were saying. And as it's because, like, it does mention there's some of them are farms or public schools, but does it say anything specifically about why?
No,
it says
I read another
USDA's Reconnect program, but does it say why they're taking it?
No, and I went to that even to read more about that program on their own websites. But other than talking about the law, which I don't recall right now the name of the law, which this is part of the spending package that they had with that law. No, I don't know why it was assigned to the USDA. I guess it doesn't matter which alphabet soup member does it. In the end, the telecommunications industry is going to get subsidized loans, more or less, and then reap the profits. So, and also the grants too, the millions of dollars in grants.
Yeah, well, another probably, and again, who's keeping an eye on this money, right, and where it's going to go, and whether it's going to actually be used for these things, or if it's going to be effective, all that. It's there's so much going on.
Probably some other little 5G champion in another town somewhere.
Yeah, well, we're down to our last few minutes here on Live Free, Think Free. Micah's got, I think, the last story we'll probably get to today on the Federal Reserve. And for those who tuned in last week, we were talking about the Federal Reserve in Houston, the impact of inflation in Houston, and then, of course, this new program you were talking about, Micah, last week that the Fed's taking that's essentially going to end up, affecting workers. And I know that there's been just this week waiting to hear what the latest announcement from the Fed's going to be. And I've been reading some interpretations, so I want to hear what you have to say here, and then I'll pull up another article that definitely doesn't paint a positive picture for the next year dealing with these interest hikes.
No, it doesn't. And in comparison, I saw the Bank of England. They raised theirs half a basis point. We're going 3/4 of basis points, or I should say the private Federal Reserve. Federal is Federal Express. Um, so there's a lot of, it seems like there's a lot of money going to the corporations, and a lot of money coming from the people, and a lot of more hardship. Whether we're talking lack of education, and the declining numbers we saw during COVID, and we're talking about during the Fauci incident, or when we're talking about the expected layoffs that are going to come from the Federal Reserve's move here. But this, like I said, the Bank of England's just adjusting theirs. Japan, for the first time in 24 years, basically sold off dollars in order to shore up yen. They haven't done it in a quarter of a century, pretty much, and they've done that. So the whole world is like the economy is just reacting everywhere. But nonetheless, here the central banksters raised the interest rates another 3/4 of a percentage points. Basically, remember that Inflation Reduction Act? I guess it must not be working, because the central banksters are still raising the interest rate. This move by the Fed marks the third consecutive month of interest rate hikes by 3/4%. Fed boss Jerome Powell noted that the Fed would continue to raise interest rates until inflation is reduced by at least 2%. The Fed's increases this year are the most aggressive in 32 years, as rates have been raised from approximately 0 in March up to 3.25 today. This has real world consequences. The rate of a 30-year fixed mortgage has more than doubled from 2.86 in September to 6% now. Furthermore, the Fed is expected to raise rates an additional 1.25% over the remainder of the year, addressing the possibility that these hikes will lead the nation into recession. Powell said, "No one knows whether this process will lead to a recession, or if so, how significant the recession will be." So, it's just a guessing game. But I really feel like this is an overlay we could almost put on what we were talking about with Fauci earlier. No one knows what the effect will be on the education of these children, but we just got to lock them down. I don't know. This is just what they do. They control things with the eye towards, their goal, but whether they can reach it or not, whether the actions they take have consequences in everyday people's lives, that's a whole different story. That, I guess, the ends justify the means to these people. And I don't know. I think that's just a kind of a scary philosophy.
It is crazy, Micah. I just wanted to show one thing. We're down here the last 2 minutes. I just searched while you were sharing this story of like the latest, because I know there's some statements coming out today from the Fed, just to see what is Google telling us about the Federal Reserve. Fed outlook is unrealistic fantasy to some investors. Federal Reserve says there's no good options now to curb inflation. Jerome Powell of the Fed warns that the U.S. housing market is headed for a difficult correction. And that's like kind of making the news now, this difficult correction that he's talking about. And then I also want to point out, and I'll share all these things.
He's using the word reset too. He keeps saying that it needs to be a housing reset.
But, where have we heard that before, right? Well, this one is for the people who might want to read this from. It was shared to me by a follower on he writes under Unorthodoxy at Substack. The Federal Reserve's plan for inflation will bring pain to Americans, and it kind of just outlines really plainly and with some graphs what we've discussed here, and a little bit more in depth, the different programs, the interest rate hikes, et cetera. But the last thing he says that I think would be good to end with, he says here, the typical person has options available to them that will allow them to learn more about the Federal Reserve. A level of awareness is absolutely necessary in order to comprehend the financial policies that originate from the Reserve. Eliminating debt accrued on credit cards and developing a spending strategy are two further steps that can be taken. One's awareness of their focus is the final step, which is essential. In spite of the fact that inflation is all around us, we shouldn't dwell on it to the point where it causes the prophecy to come true. The coming year should be devoted to one's personal development to flourish despite the challenging circumstances. So I just thought that would be, maybe a more optimistic way to look at what's going on, despite the reality that, that all signs are pointing to a difficult year ahead financially for most of the country.
Well, I think it's going to be very difficult for those who just expect things to remain the same. So if you're a fluid person, you've got ambitions and a bright mind, the world's full of adversity, but that's kind of what makes us strong. Harley Davidson came out during the recession. During the Depression. There's a lot of businesses that are created in these sort of turbulent times. So, maybe you can work harder on your idea and caring for yourself and getting that out to the world.
Absolutely. Guys, we'll see you soon. And if you're listening to us on KPFT, find us at thehoustonfreethinkers.com. Stay tuned when we come back on FM very soon. Until next time, peace.
We love you.
Damn it, Jesse, you better be cleaning your room. Do not make me come up there.
President Kanye West has made it mandatory for NFL players to levitate during the national anthem.
All the fakes and the lames with no brains. Swear these people are the same, it's insane, yeah. All these people want is fame, what a shame. Who's to blame? Ain't nobody really real as they claim, yeah. I'm so sick of all the fakes and the lames with no brains. Swear these people are the same, it's insane, yeah. All these people want is fame, what a shame. Who's to blame? Ain't nobody really real as they claim, yeah. Everybody wanna be famous, but nobody really wanna put the work in. People be thinking that how they be thinking is how it should be, and that they know for certain. Everyone have an opinion, they say that they love you, they smile, they grinning. But as soon as you turn your back on the men and the women, they hate to see somebody winning. And that is the difference between me and you. You read a headline and think that it's true. I do not sit on the internet jealous of people because I got something to do. Look at my followers, look at my likes, look at my food, look at my wife, look at my dog, look at my life. I think that I really forgot what I like. Did it really happen if there's not a pic? All of you people are making me sick. The news doesn't care about telling the people the truth, cause they know you're still gonna click. I need a break, just give me 5. Think I'm the last normal person alive. I am so sick of the people that's sick of the truth. They more entertained by the lies, damn. I'm so sick of all the fakes and the lames with no brains. Swear these people are the same, it's insane, yeah. All these people want is fame, what a shame. Who's to blame? Ain't nobody really real as they claim, yeah. I'm so sick of all the fakes and the lames with no brains. Swear these people are the same, it's insane, yeah. All these people want is fame, what a shame. Who's to blame? Ain't nobody really real as they claim, yeah. I'ma let you finish. God is my witness, taking pictures in the gym, but you ain't into fitness. Sign up for this company and you'll get hella riches. You just need all of your friends to sign up after, that's the business. People glued to their phones, they're all clones. Look at someone they don't know, like, oh my god, that's gold. Space their life on famous people's reality TV shows. Scroll on social media until their ego grows and grows. Bought a chain, but I got bills, someone's dying. We should film famous people with no skills. Think society's gone downhill. Watch the news, now I'm woke. Agree with me or you're a joke. People flexing on the gram, holding cash, but they're broke, damn. I'm so sick of all the fakes and the lames with no brains. Swear these people are the same, it's insane, yeah. All these people want is fame, what a shame. Who's to blame? Ain't nobody really real as they claim, yeah. I'm so sick of all the fakes and the lames with no brains. Swear these people are the same, it's insane,